But for start off, just out of curiosity, we were wondering actually, I'm sure everyone's heard of the industrial strategy. Who here feels that they've got a really good sense of the detail of the industrial strategy, what it means and how it ties in with highways? So there's one guy. Good. Okay, that's encouraging for the government. I think that says a lot, really. Anyway, so Martin's going to start us off with an overview. Martin.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Richard, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I just say I think Darryl's introduction there is really helpful in terms of setting up and teeing some of the conversation that we're going to have here. Just to kind of explain that the CIHT has been very supportive of these initial conversations, and we facilitated one of a number of workshops that has been part of this. I also kind of go back to rule number 1 of transport planning. Travel is a derived demand. We travel for a purpose, and actually what we're here about in terms of from an industrial strategy perspective is this recognition that the economy is at the heart of everything we do. If we think about what it is that makes our places vibrant, what is it that gives the people opportunities, it is a successful economy. And what the industrial strategy is about for the first time in this country is having a long-term plan for realizing the potential of our economy by backing businesses, creating jobs, and creating that prosperity that each of us can then feel in as we move forward. There's nothing really earth-shattering in this. It's kind of an articulation of the things that we know are important to our profession, to our places, to us as individuals. The long-term plan, though, that government is a really step change. It's a step change for a number of reasons. One is the very fact that we have that long-term plan is a marked contrast from what we've had in the past, but equally making it a cross-government plan. So this is not about one department having the initiative and then having to seek the engagement of others. It is a commitment from government at the highest level about how we actually realize it. And it touches on a number of those themes that, again, not just at this conference, but at previous years we've touched on. Productivity. We know that there are still challenges within our sector to deal with productivity. How can we deliver things more efficiently, more effectively? How can we actually deliver more things on the ground for the money that we have available? But of course, the productivity that we could generate there and deliver more on the ground has a second and third order of benefit, because it means the infrastructure is there to support the economy, the businesses, going about their day-to-day activities, which then feeds back into more jobs and more creativity and more prosperity. But we're only going to do that through partnerships. I think yesterday, one of the themes, again for me, Richard, was about collaboration. Again, not a new theme. We always talk about it as collaboration as being an important part of the work we do. But really, if we're going to tap into this potential of a long-term industrial strategy, we've got to make that collaboration even more effective. We've got to build upon the partnerships, the relationships that each and every one of us have, whether we're on the client side, the delivery side, whether as institutions or as individuals. We have to keep building that collaboration to a common objective and a common goal. Because if we do that, we will create the conditions that allow us to take this forward. Now, what the industrial strategy does is it highlights 4 catalysts, 4 agents of change. It highlights the opportunities that these provide, not in terms of challenges to what we're trying to do, but also in terms of how we go about it. So we know we have an aging population. We know that aging population brings with it challenges in terms of how we support people and movement. We know there's huge opportunities. Again, we've got innovation hubs throughout these 2 days, tapping into the innovation, the artificial intelligence that allows us to start exploring new models, new opportunities. Innovation around clean technologies will actually start to drive new business models. And overarching all of this is the opportunity that the future of mobility, the government's document that they published earlier this year, acts as a way of taking forward and putting some flesh on the aspects of the industrial strategy. Now, those 4 grand challenges are real opportunities. They're catalysts for change. They're opportunities for businesses to develop new solutions, to develop new business models. They're also opportunities to tackle some of those challenges that we were talking about yesterday, Richard, about how do we square that circle of growth and reducing environmental impact? Well, if we get clean technology, if we get the future of mobility, if we get some of these opportunities tapping in and being used as catalysts, then we can start to tackle and realize the potential of the industrial strategy. The foundations of this are very clear, and these foundations reflected in any of the sector deals that are taken forward. They're about the productivity, the foundations of productivity. How do we harness the ideas that exist within people and businesses? How do we capture those and make them come to market more easily? How do we exploit them and utilize them, not just for the benefit of our own residents, but as a market to global competitiveness? How do we tap into and develop the skills that exist within our partners? How do we actually inspire the next generation of people, possibly from different backgrounds, to come into this great industry to allow us to kick on? Because that's going to be part of the mix. Infrastructure and services. We've got a spending review coming up. We know we don't spend enough as a sector on infrastructure and services compared with our global competitors. How do we use the opportunity here to create that argument, to make the case for more investment in infrastructure and services? And by doing so, how do we then use that as a catalyst to create better places? As an institution, we published earlier this year, Better Places, Better Transport, better planning, better transport, better places. Bringing those themes together in a different focus to deliver outcomes rather than necessarily just specific projects. And if we capture all of this, we'll create that environment that businesses can thrive in. Businesses will take a decision to invest. They'll use the opportunities of those ideas and the catalysts from the industrial strategy to create the new opportunities, create the new business solutions, and actually lead us into that economic prosperity that then has a benefit for wider society. So that's the foundations on which we're building.
Excellent. Okay. So number 2 of the 3 Musketeers. So what I want to do is really bring together the brilliant introduction that Daryl set for us in the first speech and Martin's context in industrial strategy and why it should be important to everybody in the sector. Just be clear who the sector is. It's the commissioners of local highway services, i.e. local councils. It's the commissioners of national highway infrastructure, Highways England, Department for Transport, and it's the myriad of people that deliver those services with those commissioner services. So it's a very complex ecosystem, and I think Daryl quoted $1.5 billion for local roads. If you wrap it up, we're talking around about a $6.5 billion a year spend every year on highways, and we're all hearing it's not enough to do the job, or it's proportioned in the wrong places and so on. So this is a big number. It's a big number for UK PLC. There's a cast of thousands involved. Why should it be important to us? So I'm just going to summarize the points that the previous 2 speakers have made just to reinforce the point. There is no single strategic voice for that ecosystem. The soft market testing we've done so far is there are many networks, institutions, professional, trade associations purport to represent the sector, and I would include ADEPT in that, but we do not represent the whole sector. It is a very complicated ecosystem. So to achieve the goal that Daryl outlined and through the industrial strategy, we've got to collaborate better and have that single strategic voice and sense of direction. Otherwise, we will fail or remain as we are. The opposite of that, of course, is we are fragmented. Fragmentation, by the very nature, infers inefficiency and unproductive ecosystem. Or it's a productivity and efficiency levels we have not yet achieved. If I was sat in government, national government, and I was listening to the sector saying, yet again, you're not spending enough money on our highways, and if I knew that sector was had efficiencies and productivity gains it could take, would I be confident to invest more money in that sector? I'll leave that thought with you. If you were a politician under pressure to spend money in schools, Ministry of Defence, education, and so on and so forth, why would they invest more in a sector that is yet to prove it can act as a single sector and drive all those productivity issues out? However, innovation. Both speakers have talked about innovation. There is lots of innovation going in the sector. My challenge, though, to us all is we are not innovating hard enough, consistently enough, and mainstreaming it in everyday business. That is why DEP launched the Live Lab program last year, and we secured 30 million to try and demonstrate that innovation can land in everyday services. The trick will be how you then mainstream those so that when we deliver services every day, that innovation is continually in the work that we do. We've heard from Darryl already that our asset, our local asset in particular, is in massive decline. The highway sector deal has got to take the opportunity to reverse that decline and advocate as a single sector the opportunities and how we can do that in a more efficient and productive way. We're not breaking new ground here. There's a slide that Anna will probably show towards the end of her session where sector deals have been agreed with other sectors. Hannah's been personally involved in the rail sector deal and has the experience of it. I was involved tangentially in the motor sector deal several years ago. When you buy a Volkswagen, a Seat, you're buying combined investment from the motor sector internationally in shared innovation, in engines, platforms, safety. Hold the mirror up to our sector. Are we doing the same in our sector? Or is commercial reality, the way we contract, forcing the sector apart rather than together when it should be around sharing innovation? And the final point for me, it's been made again by the previous speakers, we are moving into a 20th century world unknown to some extent around how mobility is going to shift. Our infrastructure has to be dealt with in a 21st century way, not a 20th century way, because we're in danger of the means by which people connect and are mobile bears no resemblance to the infrastructure their modes of transport are operating on. So we have to bring the infrastructure into the 21st century too, to complement mobility as it moves forward. So there are a few important things from my perspective that are not my ideas. These are based on these soft market tests and roundtables we've been having across the sector over the past 6 months. They're the views of you as a sector from that soft market test.
We're getting some brilliant questions in, by the way. Thank you very much. We'll come to those in a second, but first Anna's going to put you through your paces on Slido.
So I think you all have a better understanding of what the industrial strategy is, or hopefully we'll have probably more than just David's hand go up. So it's a great pleasure to come here today at Highways UK. I'm rail through and through. I am learning quite extensively about highways. So it was great to be asked to look at perhaps the industrial strategy for highways, given the experience of securing one for the rail sector. When we, just very quickly, when we looked at a rail sector deal, there's lots of common issues and challenges that are very similar and consistent across highways. Highways is slightly more complex than rail. If I had £1 for everybody that told me that I couldn't win a rail sector deal for transport, I would have retired. We had many critics, it was political, but we did it and we got there, and it was hard work, but actually it created a really, really good partnership with government. So as Martin and Neil alluded, we've done some initial exploratory discussions around if highways wanted to look at exploring a sector deal, what it would look like, what some of the key themes would be. We wanted to come here today just to give you an idea of some thoughts. So a sector deal is really about the sector coming together and the private sector working together collaboratively. I know that word's been mentioned several times. It's a strong partnership with government. But the most important thing, it's your sector deal. The ownership has got to come from the highway sectors, irrespective of whether you work for private sector, government, local institutions. We've got to drive it forward consistently together. So rather than just another presentation, especially if you were here last night till late, I thought that we could make this a really interactive session. We'd be really interested in your views of what you felt some of the opportunities and challenges that are faced in the current market of highways. So the good news is we're going to see if technology works with me today on Slido. I apologise if it doesn't, but there are just a few simple questions that I think it's really important to gauge what you personally think are challenges to you that you face day in and day out in the sector. Right. So question number 1, what are the biggest challenges faced within highways today? So we try and get Slido to work.
Yeah, I've voted.
You voted already?
So it does, that bit's working, definitely.
Right. Hurrah. So based on some of the market testing that we've done, there's a number of consistent themes that have come through. So I'd really be interested to hear your view on what you think the biggest challenge is. Is it business models? Is it procurement? Is it fragmentation? Is it funding and investment? Is it skills? Or is it certainty?
Out of interest, what do you think people are going to say? I think I know. But I'm guessing.
They're all really important ones.
Yeah.
If it were me, I would say skills, but that's just my view.
Okay. And there is a point, presumably. Here we go.
Ooh.
Yes, I'd have gone funding as being very popular, especially after what we've just heard.
I can't see that. Someone will have to tell me.
There you go.
Okay, so we've got funding investment on 42%, certainty on 19%, 21%, sorry, procurement on 13%, fragmentation on 11%, now gone down to 10%, and skills on 10%. So, and business models way down there on 5%. So actually skills quite low, and fragmentation and procurement all on a certain level. Certainty more significant, which again we hear a lot. Every year we hear about certainty of funding, and now we're in an election campaign. It feels like that's got even worse, doesn't it? But top of the bill by quite a long way, funding and investment. So I mean, did that surprise you?
They're all very important. So I do have another question, but it's not Slido. Is there anything in that list that you believe is fundamentally missing that we need to add? If you could just raise your hand if there's anything fundamental that we don't think's there. No.
Okay, we can put that on Slido as well, or you can just write it on Slido later as well, because we're coming to your questions, which you're putting on there. So, and there's already several good ones on there. So we can talk about that.
Should we go next one?
Yeah.
So, given the fact that you've had just a quick introduction to the industrial strategy, what do you think, or what opportunities does the industrial strategy create for highways? So again, we've given you just a few options to select on Slido. Having a consistent single voice with whom government can establish challenges and priorities, social and environmental in terms of those activities, and my slides disappeared.
That's interesting. Longer term investments coming out way on top at the moment.
Single voice.
Yeah, and single
Skills.
voice. Two things we've talked about a lot today. Skills and diversity and inclusion, actually still not that high. It's interesting how skills is not a big player in this, actually. People don't feel it is. Social environment, data way down there. And the amount we've talked about data over the last few years, and the importance of data and the role of data. And obviously, that digitalisation of data was a big factor in the rail deal as well, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
The role of data. But still, longer term investment, money. So it's been funding, and it's been long-term funding. As people see as the key priorities, is money and secure money. And actually, single voice is a significant factor as well.
Single voice to ask for more money.
Yeah, yeah, single voice to ask for more money. Yeah, good point. Yeah.
That's really good feedback. That's really, really great feedback. Thank you. That helps us prioritise that a little bit further of areas that we need to look at if we want to look at the industrial strategy and sector deal. So just really to recap, I'll just pause. There are a number of sector deals already agreed. Just to give you a very quick understanding of what they are. So obviously we've got construction, we've got life science, aerospace, rail, offshore wind, creative industries, automotive, nuclear, artificial intelligence. It would be great to have one for highways, but there's a significant amount of work that the private sector and the public sector need to do to secure a sector deal. If you want to look at what sector deals exist, if you go to the government website or go to Google and just type sector deals, you can go and review what each of the sector deals has. But in simplistic terms, the industrial strategy or sector deal, there is an offer and there is an ask. So the sector offers an activity and there is an ask from government in terms of what we want to do and how we want to change things that have economic growth and prosperity for Great Britain. That's it from me.
Okay,
Thank
we've
you.
got some really good questions in, so I'm actually just going to get people's questions at you, because they're basically asking what I would ask anyway. So, so the first one is probably the obvious one of the moment. What happens if the new government no longer backs the industrial strategy? Martin, do you want to take that one on? Or do you sense that any government has got to back some kind of strategy?
So as an industry, as a profession, actually, if we think of ourselves as citizens, one of the things that we look for is some sense of where do we want to be in the future? What's the sense of the long-term plan? And I don't think that's dependent upon the outcome of the election. I think that's a common theme for whoever is in power. What I think is interesting is from the soft market testing that we've done is that sense that do we believe that we can work more efficiently and effectively as a sector? Do we think there is a better way of doing what we do? Do we think we can be better at getting a scheme developed and ready to the point of delivery? And I think if the answer is yes, and I think from my conversations and certainly just working within the sector, we can all recognize that there are opportunities to do that, then why don't we want to do it? Why don't we actually just do it? We don't need to ask permission for doing this. We don't need to be told by a government of any colour to do this. If we think as a profession there's a better way of doing it and we want to do it, let's just get on and do it and actually present an opportunity to an incoming government that when we do ask for more investment, because I think the point about investment is important, and we know as a nation we don't make enough investment in infrastructure and services. It's a lot easier to go to an incoming government and say, put more money in, if we can at the same time say, and you know what, we're in this with you together to make it easier to deliver more for the money that you've got available.
Yes, I think it's going to be tricky, isn't it, particularly if there's a Labour government with a Lib Dem involvement as well, because the environment is going to be very big on their agenda, and road building doesn't necessarily tally with that. I know we talk about cutting carbon, but...
So back to your original question, I don't disagree given a general election that's going to happen shortly. There should be some form of industrial strategy. I'm not sure whether the route to market will still be sector deals. We will have to look at what that new government looks like when it's formed. However, when we looked at the rail sector deal, we didn't just focus on the current government. We worked extremely hard with the shadow ministers and secretaries of state, and in fact they helped us lobby the deal through government. So it's backed by both parties. So the shadow secretary of state is more than aware of the deals that we're doing on transport as well as the current one.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, kind of behind the scenes. What's actually gone on. This is interesting. Probably the biggest thing missing in terms of challenges you ask people to put in there is diversity inclusion of our sector. I mean, Neil, do you think it's worrying, that's too strong a term, but skills and diversity, all those things were quite low on people's lists of immediate concerns. Do you think that's sort of being a bit short-termist, or am I being a bit unfair?
Yes. So when we have the conversation with our supply chains, when I look at the skills in the commissioning side of the business, workforce planning is a key issue. I'm looking at the profile of the people in the audience, predominantly dominated by white, older males. That is the sector. Have the people, so I guess you guys will all be retiring at some point, and there's some really chipper, younger people coming behind you. So pure, being really businesslike about it, having the supply of the right people coming to the sector, you then look just at quantity and how old they are and what their gender is. What are the skills we need? I employ people from Vodafone. I employ people from the financial services sector. I have enough highway engineers through my supply chain. What I want are creative people that think differently around the business. We were challenged by Daryl earlier. Who gets out of bed in the morning saying, right, how can I make my investment in the asset a better customer experience? So I think the whole skill agenda, the capability of the people we need to drive an integrated 21st century asset is different, quite frankly, to people like me that think about these things in a more 20th century way. So I think skills are important for two reasons. One is the quantum of the right people and the kind of skills we need. Hands up in the room, how many people have got a very clear strategy for the next 5 to 10 years and the people you need to recruit for a business that's modernised in 5 to 10 years' time?
There's a couple of very good questions here making similar points about working with other sector deals. So one is, surely the government need a highway sector deal to complement the automotive sector deal. How can you join them up? And there's another one about joining up with the rail sector and a combined approach to transport. It is the obvious thing, isn't it, when you look at it? All of these things are not working in isolation. They should be working together, but they seem to be negotiated separately. So, where is the balance there to get that right? And should there be more crossover, or is that too complex? Anna, you worked on that rail deal. Did roads ever enter sort of any element of it, or driving to a railway station, or I don't know.
So when we initially looked at the very infancy of a sector deal for rail, we wanted to actually do one for transport. And then it looked quite complicated in terms of the different offers and asks. So something that came through lots of task and finish groups or lots of consultations is we needed to look at how we could help the supply chain with certainty, funding, how we could have a more stable supply chain that flourished, whether that be skills and exporting. So I think initially a sector deal really is about how it can help your sector. If you take them too wide, you might miss an opportunity in some of the key issues or objectives that you have. In terms of joining up other sector deals, I think it's absolutely possible to do that. However, when sector deals are secured, you make a commitment with an offer and ask, and the department, Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, they hold you to account on everything that you promise to deliver. And it's a dashboard that goes out to all the ministers, secretaries of state, number 10, to check your performance against the other sector deals. It's really challenging to then join other sectors, but there's no you can easily go and have exploratory chats with automotive. It would be great to understand what's in their sector deal because they've got funding and how it works for highways. Equally, rail, there's lessons learned around data and how you might want to apply that.
Martin, what's your view on crossing over?
So I think, I think this kind of ties in quite nicely with one of the conversations we had yesterday morning where you had the subnational transport bodies. We're kind of seeing, in terms of a strategic direction, looking across transport modes at an outcome for a particular regional area, you're seeing the rise of the subnational transport bodies providing that clarity and that confidence. I think what that then does is it allows the individual sectors to think about how they can respond and actually help deliver that. I agree with Anna that I think the experience sometimes within the profession is we get excited about the need to tackle everything, and as a consequence we lose the focus that sorting out one or two key things will make the difference. As a subnational transport body, if I've got a pipeline of investment, I want to be able to then reach out to the supply chain and to the delivery bodies, knowing that they've got the confidence, we've got the funding and the investment on a 5 or a 10-year program, and that knowing that the mechanisms and the processes within the industry are going to deliver that in the most efficient and effective way. So I think it's actually about bringing the strategic, complementing what's happening within the individual elements of the sector.
Now, you mentioned the F word there, and I'll get this question in because it's critical to what people were feeding back directly. So if we get a sector deal, what will it actually mean for highways, highway authorities? Will it result in increased funding? Does government commit to anything as a result? I mean, that's going to be people's number one question, isn't it? Is it more money?
Yeah, okay. So I think we are pretty good as an industry at articulating why we need more money to maintain our assets. We have a pretty good evidence base. We can attach a number to it, and we can talk about how long we need the investment to get it up to the appropriate standard. We rarely complement that discussion, that pitch, that negotiation with, and so we are going to do this differently in order to ensure that if you invest more, you'll get more bang for your bucks. So it's only half the story. So I think the highway sector deal provides a great opportunity for us as a sector to reinforce the need for investment in the highways asset, the means by which we're going to do it differently together, and the efficiency and the productivity we can drive out of that so you get more outputs, more products, a greater customer experience for that level of investment. So do I believe we'll get more investment? I think we're going to give it a damn good go. Is the highway sector a means to do it? Yes. But we're only going to really succeed if we finish it off with the second half of the proposition.
Okay, great. We're going to call it time on that for now, but you three are staying on stage if that's okay, because then you're joining a panel with John in a second, so we can come to more questions on this in the panel as well as talking about local roads. We'll cover both of those things. But now.